Hi, good morning, everyone. So this is the third edition of the Driving Transformation Special Interest Groups as part of the Indus. I think we are living in extraordinary times with crisis all around us. So I remember one of the things that my mentor used to say is that in the seed of crisis lies opportunities, and when you are having extraordinary crisis is when you have extraordinary opportunities as well. So today the way I've structured the entire session is that I'm going to talk a few things about whatever I've learned over the period and what I've seen others do, and will need your inputs and your active participation to make this entire session interesting and useful. Yeah. So, to start with, when we are in a situation like what we are today, typically the response can be one of two things, right? So, we are here. So, the response could be either fear based or it could be based on curiosity about what is happening, right? So typically you will find that most people as individuals and as organizations as well typically become tactical, and most of their responses are from fear based, based in the fear. Whereas if you see the physiological symptoms of fear is also the same symptoms of excitement and curiosity. So if you just change the frame in terms of what you look at the current situation from being fear based to from being from a place of excitement and curiosity, knowing that we are living in a state where there is extraordinary opportunities available for us, that shift in frame has a huge positive, right? So I'll quickly stop here and ask people, whoever is on the call, what do you see in your surroundings, in your organizations? Are people responding or reacting from a place of fear or from a place of curiosity? Anyone wants to share?
Hey Mukesh, this is Balaji.
Yeah, Balaji.
The team which I'm working with and the customer base which I'm working with, right? There is a bit of uncertainty in current situation, right? So those who are going or galloping fast with some transformation approach are rethinking and taking a pause and looking at the options that were never thought of even in past, right? So one is uncertainty, and they are also a bit cautious now.
Okay.
Whether you want to call it as a fear, cautiousness, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I'm talking with a spectrum of the size of a customer base could be like a small, medium, to even some of the large customers, both India based as well as the Europe based. So
Okay.
the phenomena is not just to local; it's also global in these terms.
Yeah. Thanks, Balaji, for sharing that. I think both uncertainty and cautiousness fall on the fear side of the spectrum more than on the excitement and curiosity segment. So thanks for sharing that. Anyone else want to talk about it? Okay. So now it is clear that this shift that we want to make from fear, uncertainty, cautiousness towards excitement, curiosity. How do you do that? So if you look at human physiology, and our emotional reactions. Typically, when you are afraid or when you are from this, when you're acting out from this position of fear, uncertainty, cautiousness, even threatened to a little bit. So the entire physiology is, it speeds up. You know, your heart rates go up, your breathing increases, your voice and tone kind of goes up a little bit. You know, that is how humans perceive when someone is anxious, when someone is afraid, when someone is ready to fight or fight, right? So that is the entire fear physiology that human body goes through. Now, if you want to shift this, the only way that you can do that is by slowing down, right? So you need to be consciously, not cautiously, slow down your breathing. You need to slow down your response rate. You need to slow down what you're consuming. You need to slow down, everything that you're talking about. The way and the speed at which you respond to stimuli that comes to you. Automatically, once you slow down, your heart rates go down, your mind calms down a little bit, and you have that space between stimuli and response. Okay, that space is where you have choice, and that is the choice that can actually help you to move from fear to excitement and curiosity. Now, how do you do that is another question, right? So let me. Okay, so typically you are here, right? Uncertainty, which is where you do not know what to do. So from here, you need to move to discovery mode. So what is happening around us? Try to take stock. So this is where we have the sense, seek and sense stimuli that we need to take place. We need to see what is happening around us. We need to sense what does that mean for us. And once we have that, then we decide on how do we want to respond to these stimuli, right? So again, this is where instead of reacting to stimuli, we start responding to stimuli. So this is where the choice gets made, right? So just a quick exercise. If I ask you to slow down your breathing for just 1 minute, can you try that? So let's just for 1 minute take slow, deep, deliberate breath and see physiologically in your body, are you able to feel a sense of calm? Just indulge me for a minute. Take deep breath. Does anyone feel that it actually slows down your heart rate and your body slightly shifts? Anyone? So what it does for me, it automatically slows the heart rate. It automatically tells your mind that if you are willing to take slow breaths, then there is no threat for your body. So automatically your mind also moves away from the fight or flight response. Once you do that is when you can actually objectively look at what is happening around you and do that seek sense phenomena in order for us to actually respond in a way that we are talking about. So there are two kinds of changes that you will see around you, right? So one is cyclical in nature, so goes up, down, goes down. It keeps repeating. And then there is linear. So does anyone can give me an example of what could be a cyclical change and one could be a linear change? Anyone? Indulge me. I mean, if unless we interact, um, uh, it's just going to be me talking, which will not be very interesting. Any examples of cyclical change? Stock markets, they go down now, but at some point in time they will also come up, and then again they'll go down, then they'll again come up. Seasons, right?
Yes.
Anything else? That is anyone? Okay. Any examples of a linear? So the reason why it is important is for us to understand whether the current scenario that we are looking at is that a cyclical or is that linear. So is aging population a linear change? So once you become 44, you can only become 45. You cannot become 43 or 42 or younger anymore. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So where do you see the current change that we are going through or the current crisis we are going through? So does it fall on the cyclical or does it fall on the linear?
It's a combination of both, right? There are certain things which are cyclical nature,
Yeah,
right? And there are certain things which are on the what is that? The second path, which is
linear.
linear in nature. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a combination of both. There are certain changes which are linear. There are certain changes which are cyclical, both.
correct. So what are cyclical in nature and what are linear in nature? Let's think through. So do you think work from home is going to get linear? We'll see a lot more of work from home after the crisis is finished or no?
I would put this as a cyclical, right?
Okay.
It, it's not 100% this way, but I'm saying it's going to be on the both the side.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So
Those
let's keep it on
those
both sides.
those industry which never thought of work from home as an option has
Hmm.
become a distinct reality now.
Yeah. Okay. What else? What is cyclical right now? So after 21 days of shutdown, what will happen? So assuming that we are able to control the spread of the virus, what happens then?
So Mukesh, right, the way I see, um,
Mhm.
maybe right, you will, as a part of the cyclical, you may come up on the other side of the curve. There could be other
Mhm.
region which will go on the down of the curve. So it's going to be cyclical. So
Correct.
unless everyone reacts the same time, same way, I think
Mhm.
it's not going to stop. So that's from the local point of view.
Okay.
Mukesh, I think what is cyclical and what is linear depends on the time frame that you talk about. Okay, if I'm taking a short-term view, next 21 days, 3 weeks, practically everything is going to be linear. The
Hmm.
incidence of work from home is going to increase. The economic
Hmm.
downturn is going to be linear, but in the other way.
Mhm.
So how you classify something as cyclical and linear is more a function of time that you're considering than anything else.
Yeah, that's correct as well. So let's assume that we are talking about the time frame, 1 year from now. So from now till 1 year, what do you think would definitely change forever, and that will become linear, and anything that will come back and we go into that cycle becomes cyclical.
Okay. Uh, Taking the optimistic view, I expect that the economy will be cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
Taking a
So it will
pragmatic
come back.
view, I see that work from home will be linear in the sense that
Mm-hmm.
short term it will go up and then it will come down same way linearly.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't call it. I mean, that is the definition of an up and down cycle. But I see this as a phenomenon which will not recur. It will not be
Mm.
cyclical beyond 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Okay.
see that anxiety or fear will be linear. It will
Mm-hmm.
increase and then it will go down.
Okay. Okay. So anxiety or fear. Okay. So that's something that you need to think through. What is cyclical and what is linear. The reason why it is important is another way to look at things is something called as hard trends and something called as soft trends. So in the current crisis, if we are able to identify what are hard trends, so when I say hard trends, what I mean is they definitely will happen. Okay. So for example, aging population is a hard trend. The power of smartphone going up and up is a hard trend. The cost of memory going down until a particular point in time is a hard trend. The cost of healthcare going down is a soft trend, right? So it can go up or it can go down depending upon the interventions made in the economy or whatever. So the seed of opportunity in the current crisis is if we are able to identify some of these hard trends and make plans and anticipate what will that mean for us as individuals as well as for us as an organization. So for each one of you on this call in your industry, if you are able to identify in this crisis what are the hard trends which you can definitely know will happen, that then allows you the opportunity to anticipate what that means, by the seek sense response and then act accordingly, right? So that is one way of looking at the opportunity and where we are in terms of turning crisis into opportunity. So this can be used to predict and act, right? So another way of looking at the entire crisis as an opportunity thing is most changes are easier to do when an organization is going through a crisis, or even as an individual we are going through a crisis, right? So this is what is called burning platform. So whenever organization leaders want to make sweeping changes, they will talk about a crisis and why it is important to change and why it is important to change now. And so that's the opportunity that we have right now. So this crisis actually allows us to look at you know three ways to change. So one is the mindsets of people in organization towards digital transformation, towards some of the value that IT can bring in. So it can allow us to change people's behaviors, and it also allows us to impact on processes. So in times of crisis, it's very, very easy to change all these three. Do you guys agree, or do you have any other opinion on this? Have you seen this happen?
Yeah, Mukesh, I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay. So what does that mean? So how does this knowing this help us, right? So the same thing can also be kind of mostly shown like this, right? So you have the mindset, you have the motivations which lead to behavior, and then you have the methods or the processes. So in order to change mindsets, there are two levers that we have, right? So one is what I call victim uh, uh, utilizer transformer. So the second lever is what is called breaking path dependence. So this is path dependence. So we'll talk about all this in a little more detail. From a method perspective, it's about asking the right questions, right? So for example, in the previous thing we saw, no, what are the hard trends? What are some of the things that are cyclical change versus what are some of the linear change? What is it that we are seeking? What is that we are making sense out of that seeking so that we can respond? So all of that is questions, asking the right kind of questions, and then answering them with can if statements. So we'll talk about can if statements as well. And then of course motivation, it comes as two things again here. One is activating emotions, and again the other thing is around building habits, new habits. So let's start with building new habits. So there is a research done by uh, uh, someone called as BJ Fogg. Okay, so he runs the Behavior Design Institute in Stanford. So what he talks about is behavior is equal to M, A, and P. So let's break this down a little bit. Sorry. So this is, if you look at ability and map it against motivation. Okay, so this is how the trend on the graph goes. So this is hard to do, easy to do. This is low motivation to high motivation. So this is the M of the equation. Ability is the A of the equation, and P is a prompt at some point in time. So what his research has shown is that if you want to start a new behavior, and this holds true for both individuals as well as organizations. So you need to start here, which is it has to be extremely easy to do, should require low motivation, and there is a prompt which tells people that they need to do something. So for individuals, if you ask me, so one of the things that, let's say, we spoke about slowing down, right? So every time you watch news or when you hear people talking from the place of fear and getting angry or whatever, you want to slow down your thinking, right? So you can actually say that I can create a habit by doing this at or before or after X, which is something, I will do Y. So this is the behavior change model or habit creation model that he talks about in his book called Tiny Habits. So for example, one of the things that I want to do is to exercise, right? Or drink more water. So drinking more water is a very easy example. So every time I take out my phone and check my email or my social media feed, I'll drink a glass of water. So what it does is it's extremely easy, and you've put a trigger saying that, okay, after I do this, I will do this, or before I check my email, I will drink water. So the same equation can also be brought into your organization to help build organizational habit. Now, any questions on this? So typically where we stand or where we start our habit formation is that, okay, we say, I will do 1 hour of gymming every day. So that is hard to do and requires extremely high motivation. So it will always kind of, somewhere fall outside of this action curve, which is why typically people do not end up doing the exercise or following up on all their commitments that they do. So important to understand this entire equation, make it easy to do with low motivation. Of course, if you have high motivation and it is hard to do, then the chances of that behavior happening is very difficult. So this is also applicable in organizational setting. For example, if you want people to, let's say, fill out a particular form or follow a particular process, so you can use the same equation, which is B is equal to MAP, and use drivers for them. So let's say, for example, does anyone have an example of you want people to do certain things, but you don't see them doing it, but it is important for that to be done? So if someone can give me an example, I can actually use this to share how this can be used.
Time booking.
Yeah, okay. So time booking is a classic example in professional services firms. So what can we do out of these three levers that can help build this as a habit, right? So one of the things that we can do, so if I look at the thing, so is it easy to do? Yasin, so is it easy to do? Is time booking a very simple thing to do when you open up the application?
Yes, it is. Sorry,
Yes.
I was on mute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So it's easy, right? Now, do people have high motivation or low motivation to do it?
Low motivation.
Low motivation, right? So, which means that we need to have a prompt which can actually make them to do this, right? So, is there a way for us to create a prompt which makes it absolutely easy for them to open up that application? So once they open the application, it is very simple to do, right? So in order to make that a habit, let's say, for example, every Monday morning at 9 a.m., they get an email with a link to the time booking application. And they just click the link and the application is open and they click it, book their time. Do you think that will help?
Yeah, I guess it will.
So the idea is we are introducing a prompt in this case. So it is easy to do. So there is nothing much that we need to do there. So the motivation is low. That is why the prompt is important. So the prompt has to be at that point where it should be extremely easy for them to do that action. Same way. Anyone else has an example? Yes? No? Okay. So let's move to the next one. So let's talk about the opportunity from a process perspective, right? So I'm sure you've all seen these things. So this is low, high, low, high. So if you have to plot um, difficulty of doing something against the impact of that stuff, right? So you'll find that this segment where it is low difficulty and low impact, right? So low impact, low difficulty, these are low hanging fruits. So ever heard of this in your corporate world? Everyone talks about attacking low hanging fruits, right? First. So low difficulty, high impact are quick wins, right? So high impact and high difficulty are true transformations. And low impact and high difficulty are typically non-starters. Nobody wants to touch them, right? So if you look at this, now look at, okay, sorry. So there are two things that you can impact in an organization, right? You can either help make more money, you can help save more money, right? So this is all about efficiencies, and it's all about growing revenue and top line. So here there are certain things that you can do in order to help your organization, okay, to make more money, which is you can find new ways to address existing customers and their engage them in new ways. So existing customers and new customers, right? So new ways to address existing customers, new ways to find new customers, or you can also look at, okay, sorry, just let me rephrase this. So we have existing customers and we have new customers. So serving them in new ways, finding them. So this is all about top line growth. So in terms of costing and saving more money and increasing efficiency is all about processes, right? So what process can you digitize? What process can you automate? What process can you eliminate? What process can you integrate? And where can you bring transparency? Now, if you look at these segments or opportunities in your organization, and if you look at this map in terms of non-starters, low-hanging fruits, quick wins, and transformations. Where do you think each one of these falls in? So, what do you think about digitization? Is it low-hanging fruit, quick win, transformation, or a non-starter? I would assume it's a quick win, right? Or not even a quick win. If it can also be a low-hanging fruit. Very simple, easy to do, and creates a little bit of an impact right away, right? Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah, digitization will be quick win.
Yeah, okay. So what about automating existing processes? Where will that fall?
Transformation.
Okay. And what about eliminating certain process? So when we talk about digitization, automation, a lot of times we miss looking at processes that can be completely eliminated, right?
Must be low hanging fruits.
Low hanging fruits. Okay. How about integration? So how can you integrate multiple disparate systems and make data available for everyone else? So does that where will that fall? If you ask me, that's typically where we are non-starters, because it takes it's not easy to do, and the impact is not immediately seen, and not seen by many people. So very few people who see that. So that's where you will find that most organizations still have islands of data and systems that don't talk to each other. So transparency, bringing transparency is another area which is not easy to do and is not very um, uh, you know uh, high impact for a lot of important people. So those also I think are also non-starters. So serving existing customers in new ways. So where do you think will that fall in? I would assume it's quick win. Whereas finding new customers and serving them, I think is will fall under transformation. Now, most of the times, as IT organization, we do not necessarily see identifying and finding new customers and serving them as something that we are responsible for, right? So, we're always looking at increasing efficiencies, or maybe in some organizations they look at how can we reach and serve existing customers a better way. So this is where you'll find people create an app for existing customers to interact with, or they have an online channel, create a new channel for them to work with, and that's about it. I've very rarely seen IT organizations coming up with ways to finding new customers and serving them. So once we know this, then there is the culture of your organization and the ability that you have in your team. So if you were to look at your organization today and see where do you see the transformation opportunity among all of these in your organization, assuming everything that you propose will go through, where do you think you see the biggest opportunity today? Guys, you have to respond. Okay, so you don't have to respond.
Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, Balaji, go on.
Can you repeat your question? I missed it.
So, given the current situation in your organization, where do you see the biggest opportunity for transformation? So, is it digitization? Is it automation? Is it eliminating processes? Is it integrating processes? Is it bringing more transparency? Is it addressing same customers in new ways? Is it finding new customers? Where do you see the biggest opportunity? So these are questions that you need to think, right? So that's the whole point about the next question, which is, asking propelling questions. What is propelling questions? So these are questions that actually help you identify the area where you can actually have a significant impact for your business. Okay, so these can be actually categorized into two different things. So one is around ambition and one is around constraints. So this model I'm showing is based on a book called A Beautiful Constraint. Yeah. So the book is absolutely brilliant in terms of talking about the way for us to use constraints and use them not as something that limit us, but something that can actually propel us to do something really significant. So we can look at it from an ambition perspective and we can look at it from a constraint perspective. So any question here?
No.
So the ambition can be in terms of growth, which is the revenue or finding new customers, serving existing customers in a better or faster way. The ambition can be in terms of impact that we want to have in the world, or it can be in terms of quality of your product or services. It can be in terms of experience, delivering an excellent experience for your customers. Constraints can be in terms of resources. So what questions here can be, given the limited resources that we have, what can we do? Constraints can be in terms of time. So one of the things, one of the stories that I came across is that there is a hospital in the US who wanted to order 500 beds because they were trying to construct a temporary hospital for the COVID patients to be treated. And they were struggling to find someone who can actually fulfill this order of 500 beds. So they reached out to someone from SAP. They said that this actually happened yesterday. So they reached out saying that they wanted to order 500 beds. Is there a way that this account manager can actually help them? So this guy went on and said, okay, tried to use Ariba Discovery, which was made free for all customers because of this COVID situation, and found a vendor, reached out to the vendor, spoke to them, and connected the hospital with this vendor who didn't know each other. And in 30 minutes flat, the customer was actually able to place an order for 500 beds to this vendor, who's also, by the way, an SAP customer. So here, if you look at it, both constraints of time, resource, and growth has happened in one shot, right? So the hospital had a constraint of time and resource, but they had the ambition to grow. And by asking this question that, who can help and whether or not we can make this happen, they could actually make this happen. So any questions on this?
So where will you put this question, the readiness of the customer also for engaging into a transformation, right? Whether that falls in the
Yes.
request side?
Yes, it's transformation, right?
Yeah.
Or no? Just asking.
It's a transformation, yeah.
Yeah. So once you ask these questions, again, all of these will depend on your culture in your organization and the kind of people you have in your organization. You ask these questions, and once you ask these questions, you'll typically find that people will bring out all the reasons why this cannot happen or that cannot happen. We have tried this before. We have done this in the past. We don't have the resources. We don't have the ability. We don't have the capability. We don't have the technology. All of that. So that is where the next part comes in, which is answering these questions of either ambitions or constraints using can if statements. So instead of saying that we cannot do this, you say, okay, we can do this if we get X. We can achieve this if we can do Y. We can achieve this if we can combine X and Y. We can achieve this if we can find a partner. We can achieve this if we can find maybe budgets with someone else. And these are the can if answers or attitude that is extremely important in terms of crisis, because these are the times when you will not have all the resources in place, you will not have all the budgets in place. You will find difficult for you to get people to agree, and this is also where creativity plays a big role, right? So if you look at this model that we spoke about, so we spoke about habit formations, we spoke about questions, we spoke about the how do you answer these questions with can if answers. Now let's come to the mindset, victim, utilizer, or transformer, right? So each one of us, by our natural tendencies, fall into one of these categories. We either play victim, saying that no, if only I had gone to an IIT, if only we had enough budgets, if only we have all the technologies in place, we could do whatever we want to do. You could play transformers naturally, wanting to go out and do stuff and achieve despite all uh, difficulties. And then there are people who are neutralizers, who don't do stuff by themselves, but at the same time do not play victim. So if you tell them that no, you go ahead and do this, they'll go ahead and do that, as long as they have the budgets and all of the other things taken care of. So that is something that we need to identify and move from one to the other to come the transformers. So how do you do that? There are 4 stages in moving from victimhood to actual transformers. So the first stage is being a victim, saying that no, okay, I don't have all the things that I need in order to do that. So the next stage is the neutralizing stage. This is where we start talking about workaround strategies. Now this is where we start talking about finding constraints and answering them with can if answers. So once we have this, then we become responsive transformers. So this is where we start talking about, okay, we see the potential and we see that, the transformation is a little bit possible. And then we become proactive transformers. This is the transition that we need to take our teams through as well by using the propelling questions and the can if answers. So the reason why we are talking about all of this is, in any crisis situation like where we are right now, the opportunity lies in doing what everyone else is not doing. And this is how you can actually find ways and means to do things which are different from what you do normally as well. Right? So, any questions so far? We have covered 4 topics so far. Now we'll talk about path dependence. So what is path dependence? Right? So typically in an organization, someone comes up with an idea and they do implement the idea. It works well. So it is a good practice. Right? And once it's proved that this is a good practice, so this becomes a proven practice, which then becomes a best practice, and then it becomes locked in. So have we seen this happen in our organization? Someone does something interesting, they see some good results, and then everyone in the organization appreciates them, and then it becomes a best practice, and then everyone wants to do it, irrespective of the context in which this practice was good practice and it became a proven practice. The context changed, but then our behavior is still locked in. Yes? No? Has anyone seen this happen in your organization? At this point, no one knows why we do this the way that we are doing it, but it is the way organizations do.
Yeah.
Right?
Agree.
So that is where is the next step that we want to go to, which is challenging beliefs and assumptions. So at this stage, right now, in this crisis, you have the opportunity to question some of these locked in practices. And this is where technology and new practices, new processes can be created. This is where you can actually break these and actually create new practices or new processes. So this is where you can actually either automate, eliminate, integrate the processes. Yeah. So we spoke about questions, we spoke about can if answers, spoke about habits, we spoke about the victim utilizer transformers, we spoke about the path dependence. The last thing is about activating emotions. Right? So a lot of times we feel that in an organizational context we are taking rational decisions, which is we look at ROI, we look at best practices, We look at data and decide based on what the data tells us. Whereas in reality, what our researchers have seen is people decide based on emotional factors, and then rationalize that decision. So if you actually study the research on this, the decision happens based on the emotional or how you feel about a particular thing, and then we actually rationalize it with data, ROI, and best practices. So, which means that if you really want people to decide and work with you on the projects that you want to drive, you need to be able to emotionally get the right response with them. Now, how do you go about doing that? Is through empathy and knowing how emotions work, right? So it is also proven through multiple research experiments that the fear of loss is a much stronger emotion which leads to action than the benefit of gain. So if I were to tell you that you have 50% chance of losing $100 or $100,000, you are much better to act. Whereas if I tell you that you have a 50% chance of gaining certain amount of money, so it is also said that this fear of loss is at least 10 times more powerful than the benefit of gain. This is also because of the evolutionary nature of our brain and how our mind works. Just we value what we already have and don't want to lose it, rather than find something new. But there's always risk of finding something new which we may not want. What we already have, we don't want to lose. So using this, can you come up with a way to speak to the decision makers in terms of when you talk about ROI, instead of just looking at the benefits of attaining whatever you do, can you also talk about the cost of not doing it? So how many of you on this call, when you prepare your ROI statement, also include cost of not doing it? Let's say you're talking about a technology project. Let's say you want to go ahead and implement some software. So you put together an ROI deck, right? Saying that, okay, this is the cost, this is the benefit, and this is the, in 18 months, we will recoup all the investments that we have made. How many of you actually also put together a cost of not doing it? Anyone?
It's not done normally. It's not
Not
considered that
done.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, and if you actually look at it, the way human psyche works is that if the cost of not doing is significant, yeah, that by itself will give you the decision or the approval for you to go ahead and do it. So this is using the psychology of fear of loss to get people to feel certain way and to act in a different way. So while it is important to talk about the ROI, it is also important to talk about the cost of not doing it. That is something very powerful. And wherever I have seen this being used, it makes the decision making very, very easy. So I can tell you this from my conversation from one of the CIOs. I was asking him, how did you get your chairman to approve the budget for the S4HANA transformation that they were going through? And the response from the CIO was very simple. He said that, if you do we want to be an organization which is forward looking? Do we want to really attract young talent? And do we want to be considered, a modern organization? The answer to all three of them was yes. Then the CIO just simply said that, then this is the cost of doing it. If you don't do it, none of that holds true. You will not be able to attract young talent. You're not at the cutting edge of technology. And the decision was made. So that kind of concludes what I had prepared for today's session. So any questions, comments, thoughts?
Mukesh, while I agree what you said in this in 1 hour, right? I come to the last point, right? When we have to go back and talk to engage to a customer on a transformation, right? The question is, right? In good times, right? It's easy to go through, right? You have some of the other levers to manipulate your data point and convince them. But when you absolutely see that, right? The revenues are clearly dipping in. The market share is contracting. The opportunities are coming down, right? And then what is the right way to do it, right? And then you can't say the thing which you just said, right? That you want to attract the good people, you want to be market leader, because then it becomes very, very competitive data. You need to give them a data point which can be verified, which can be substantiated, and can be quantified as well. So how do you help in those things?
I think that's an assumption that we are making, that the data points by themselves will convince someone to actually sign off on a project. I think my experience and whatever little that I see from my interactions with a lot of these organizations and CIOs is that while data points are important and play a role, what is more important in terms of convincing the organizations is also the soft points of where the ambition of the organization is. So if today, if you were to go and say start a ERP refresh project because the ROI is going to be in XY day and all of that data points, I do not know how much of tractions you will get. But if you start talking about how you can use a ERP refresh project to completely eliminate certain process and save costs by asking those propelling questions in terms of the processes and transformation from there, I think that would be a better approach to have a conversation with senior leaders rather than ROI calculation. Because right now, I don't think people are looking at ROI. People are still looking at short-term tactical thing. First thing you need to do is you move yourself away from fear-based to curiosity and based thinking, and from problem solving to probability thinking, and then take your prospects along that journey as well. And in order to do that, you need to do these, to be able to ask these propelling questions in terms of, there are constraints. So, for example, can you come up with a payment model which makes it easier for them to start on a project with you right now? So that's a constraint based question, which if you can answer with a can if answer, then you have a point. Then you can actually start talking about these projects. Does that make sense? It is not easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to force yourself to think about those questions along those directions. So, for example, let me just come. Yeah. So, are you talking about constraints in terms of resources, time? The constraints can also be in terms of money. So, money can also be a resource, right? And tie it with one of the either the ambitions that we are talking about here, or one of these processes, because everyone today wants to save money, but at the same time also want to serve their existing customers or find new customers. So if you can help them in one of those, I'm sure they are willing to talk to you. Balaji, does that help?
Yeah. 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 Yes. Yeah.
Anyone else? Any questions? Thoughts, comments? Again, this is just something that I have put together based on what I have learned and what I've observed in the market. Some of the leading cutting edge organizations that are at cutting edge of technology, where they use technology as a competitive differentiator. They do a lot of these without actually knowing that they are doing these things. So I've seen this in organizations like Asian Paints, in organizations like Zulik Pharma, in organizations like Nestle. Some of these things happen, but not necessarily in these format. Unilever, for that matter. So again, I'll just reiterate before we conclude. In the current scenario, it is easy to think and act tactical and from a fear, uncertainty, cautious frame of mind. But it is important to slow down and actually, start thinking about what is happening around us, what is happening inside of our organization, from a curiosity based thinking. It is important to understand, seek what is happening, make sense of what is happening, and then make the right choice to respond. And of course, understand what are some of the hard trends that will happen, given that we know where we are over the next 6 to 9 months. So markets will rebound. Customers will expect to reduce cost drastically. Supply chains will be re-looked at. For example, so in organizations or industries where China-based supply chains will be re-looked at, you will have organizations who will do risk rebalancing in terms of their supply chains, in terms of their procurement. So these are all things that will definitely happen. So the economy will slow down. The economic impact of the current COVID will definitely take a longer period of time to be felt and to be experienced, which means that every organization will be looking to find ways to eliminate costs so that they can continue to remain profitable. Every organization will look to identify and address new market segments and sell more and different products to existing customers. if you can actually find a way internally, if you are in your organization, find a way to reduce cost and find a way to address new customer segments, your projects will get green lighted faster. If you're a partner and if you are trying to sell this to your customers, use these levers in order to be able to have these conversations. And again, remember the seven questions that we spoke about, the mindset, methods, and motivation. Move away from being victim to neutralizer to transformers. Identify those processes which kind of nobody questions now, because at one point in time they were the best practice. Those are the questions, those are the processes that you should actually question, and where you will find significant value. Then, of course, ask these questions either from a constraints based or from a ambitions based point perspective. Answer them using can if statements. That will force you to come up with ways and means to go around the current challenges in terms of not having enough cash, or not having enough resources, or not having enough time, and use emotions to talk about also fear the cost of not doing certain things, and cost of acting tactically from a fear-based scenario. And of course, use this opportunity to build new habits both inside of yourself as well as for your organization. So that's where I would like to close today. If there are any questions, we can take. Otherwise, thank you for your time. And I would really appreciate if you can just share your feedback as well.
Mukesh, and will you in any case share the recording what you did?
Yes, I will.
Thanks, Mukesh. Very helpful. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, if not, thank you everyone. Have a good day. Stay safe. Stay home. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Mukesh. Bye.
Thanks, Yasin.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Swaz. Thanks.